The Stone Age is one of those movies that they would show on cable TV at like 2 or 3 in the morning, and they would show it over and over again. So therefore I watched it over and over again. And I always liked the movie, but I also always felt like it was just kind of riding on the coattails of Dazed and Confused. But that was until I found out that The Stone Age is actually based off of a short film called Tax Chicks that was made years before Dazed and Confused, so I was wrong. Now this was kind of a hard one to do because there's almost no information about it online. I had to do a lot of investigating. I wasn't able to find all of the locations, but I think I did pretty good. So today we're checking out filming locations for the 1994 comedy, The Stone Age. Let's go see what we can find. So the movie begins with Crump's brother hitching a ride, and that happens right here on Vista Del Mar, across from Dockweiler Beach. But I wasn't able to pinpoint the exact spot where he's standing because so much has changed around here. But notice these old style lampposts. And probably what tells us for sure that this is the right spot is all of these buildings that you can see off in the distance. It's kind of hard because they're so far away, but you can actually match up all of those buildings. And you'll notice in the beginning of that scene, you can see a low flying airplane, and that's because LAX is just to the left of us. After giving Crump's brother a ride, we see our dreadlocked friend sitting in Petro Park, telling all of his buddies about Crump's brother's chicks. His truck was parked right here in front of this backstop, and you can see this radio antenna on the hill behind him. All of his buddies would have been sitting right across from him over in this area. At the time, there was an oil pump right over here, but most of those have been removed. Now, even though all the oil pumps have been removed from inside the park, there's still a few on the outside. You can actually see one right over here. So after hearing about the girls at Torrance Beach, Tack decides he's gonna try and worm in and steal him away from Crump's brother, and we see him walking away from all his buddies, walking right towards where I'm currently standing. After that, we see the title of the movie, and if you pay close attention, you can see what appears to be a billboard for Jurassic Park. Keep in mind this movie is set in the 70s. During the opening credits of the movie, we see them driving around on different parts of Ventura Boulevard, like past this Ralph's shopping center on the corner of Ventura and Winnetka. However, it's pretty remodeled and not too visible anymore. Or passing by this shopping center at the intersection of Ventura and Burbank. Or passing by this building on the corner of Ventura Boulevard and Calvin Avenue, which is now an auto body shop. Or quickly passing by this shopping center, and even though the sign is different, you can see a neon sign in the movie for this business, LA Watches. This was Malibu Bob's, the small burger stand that Joe and Hub stop at to try and find out where there's some parties going on. The girls would have been parked right here behind the hamburger stand eating their hot dogs, and then Joe and Hubs pull up, and you can see this apartment building in the background behind them. After leaving Malibu Bob's, they're now cruising down Ventura Boulevard past Liquor World, a place that we'll revisit in just a few. When he puts him in a headlock, that begins on Ventura Boulevard, a couple of blocks west of Tampa. Notice this sign for the car wash, and these two signs can also be seen pretty well in that shot. They've now moved a couple of blocks east down Ventura Boulevard, passing through the intersection of Ventura and Van Alden. You can see this Chevron gas station, and that sign for Ross that's now pretty well covered by a tree can also be seen. But right here is where Tack was hitchhiking. He would have been standing right beside this lamppost, and you can see the sign behind him for El Paso Barbecue. And I was extremely disappointed to arrive today and find that El Paso Barbecue's gone, because that's been here for as long as I can remember. That's how I actually first recognized that this movie was filmed in the valley. Anyways, Tack's standing right here next to the lamppost, and you see Joe and Hubs approaching from this way, and you can see this shopping center behind them. And then after he spits on Tack, they screech to a halt right over here. And then he's right here telling them about the chicks that he has over in Torrance Beach. This is Lanark Street, and a lot of the movie was filmed right here on this block. Joe and Hubs are driving down the street right here, and they notice the former home of Frankie Avalon. They would have been driving this way down Lanark Street, and then right over here, this is the house that was used as the Frankie Avalon estate. Notice that flared out pillar with the porch light on it. That can be seen just behind the Frankie Avalon sign. And that sign would have been right there on the front lawn. Joe and Hubs parked their car right next door, and we see them moving past the Frankie Avalon estate. They would have been walking right here in front of the house. And then they crouched down behind a car right in front of the garage. And they're crouched down behind a car staring at this house, which of course was the house that Crump's Brothers chicks are in. And as you can see, the house looks pretty close to how it did in the movie. It's had some updates, but it still looks pretty similar. They head up to the porch and knock on the front door, and that's when they first see Laney. And as you can see, the front door has been updated since the movie was filmed. After Joe and Hubs worm out on Tack, we see him right here talking on a payphone, talking to Snot Rag. And that would have been a prop payphone that was placed here just for the movie. At the time, this building wasn't here. This was just a parking lot. However, these gas stations back here, those were there at the time and can be seen in that shot. And right behind him, you can see a tree and a fire hydrant, which I believe were these two. And that would mean roughly where this tree now is where the prop payphone was. After Tack hangs up the payphone, he walks down the sidewalk this way, and we see him walk right past a sign that says Torrance Beach 3 miles. But of course, we're on Ventura Boulevard in the valley, probably a good 30 or 40 miles from Torrance Beach. A few moments later, we see Joe and Hubs pull into the parking lot of Liquor World. And where this pharmacy now is, this used to be Liquor World. And it was a real liquor store. I actually shopped there many times, and it looked just like it did in the movie. However, unfortunately, it wasn't actually run by Taylor Negron. As they're about to walk into the liquor store, they see the Samoan that Crump's brother beat up. He walks out the doors right here, and notice this red pole. He comes walking out the door, and he walks over to his car that was parked right here. Right here is where the counter was. And Joe and Hubs would have parked right over here, right across from the liquor store. This building was not here at the time. This was just a parking lot for Michael's Arts and Crafts, which would have been right there. And when they're walking away from their car, you can see the sign behind them for Michael's. The only problem with that is Michael's wouldn't have existed back then. Now, what's really a bummer is that Michael's Arts and Crafts was here up until pretty recently. I want to say maybe 5 years ago. And it's another store that I shopped at many times whenever my parents had to get things like birthday party decorations and stuff like that. That was the store we came to. And this is the same location that just a few moments earlier Tack was talking on the payphone. That would have been right over there. He was standing in front of the parking lot for Michael's. I came across the street to give you a better idea of what everything looked like. So right there, that was the liquor store. Joe and Hubs would have been parked somewhere right over here. This would have been the Michael's and Michael's parking lot. And then right over here would have been the payphone that Tack was talking on. After leaving Liquor World, Joe and Hubs are driving down Ventura Boulevard about a block west of Tampa. This house was used as the Hanky residence, or Snot Rag's house, and the house has been very well kept. It's had a few updates, but there's still quite a few things on this house that match up with the one that we see in the movie. Tack walks up to the front door, which, as you can see, that's one of the things that's been updated. He's standing here on the porch talking to Snot Rag and Mrs. Hanky, and as he's talking to them, you can see this house across the street, which actually still looks the same, but it's now pretty well blocked by this carport that wasn't here at the time. Now, we probably get the best view of the house when they're in the car about to pull out of the driveway, and there would have been a bike at the end of the driveway that they run over. Of course, there's no longer a white picket fence. However, that window on the garage and the shutters on the sides of the window still match up. And right next door to the girl's house is the next door neighbor that Joe and Lainey hop his wall to go swimming in his pool. To get the same shot that we see in the movie, I should be standing a little bit more to the left, more of a head-on view, but you can see that there's now trees blocking the front of the house. There's also a fence blocking the front yard, and the homeowner's actually out there right now building that fence. So if I would have come maybe 2 or 3 days ago, we would have had a better shot, but this is now the best we can get. But if we come over on this side, we can still see half of the wall that they hop over. The other half is now on the other side of that fence. But like I said, at least we can still see part of the wall, and you can actually see this house in that shot as well. Tack and all of his buddies finally figure out where the chick's house is, and when they're marching up to the front porch, you can see this house right across the street. After taking a walk on the beach, Jill and Joe return to find Tack and all of his buddies hanging out on the front porch. And this is pretty much the shot that we would have got of them hanging out on the porch, but now this tree is blocking it. Joe tries to get everybody to leave the porch, but that doesn't go too well. They end up picking him up and throwing him into the bushes. That happened right here in the front. They would have come down those steps right there and then thrown him into these bushes in the front yard. When Joe's finally about to hook up with Lainey, he has a vision about his life and realizes he doesn't want to grow up to be a lonely old man drinking Ox 45 by himself. And that was filmed at the same park that we see in the beginning of the movie that was used for Petro Park. Joe would have got out of the car that was parked right over here, and you can see this building in the background behind him. He then sees himself sitting at a table all alone, eating a beef and potato burrito and drinking Ox 45, and that was filmed right over here in front of this fence. That oil pump in the background is the same one that we see in the beginning of the movie. He then sees himself laying in his deathbed right on top of home plate. The camera then does an overhead shot, pans up, and we see a bit of these stairs, and then it pans over to this hillside with this oil derrick on top of it, but all of those oil derricks are now gone. Meanwhile, back at the house, things aren't going too good because Crump's brother finally shows up, but luckily, so does Jill's dad. He takes care of Crump's brother and Tack and all of his buddies. Joe and Hubs manage to avoid the cops, and they escape just in the nick of time. And right here in the driveway of the house is where the cop car would have been parked, and we see them bringing out Tack and all of his buddies. As Joe and Hubs are leaving the neighborhood, another car passes by and stops them for directions, and it turns out to be none other than Frankie Avalon. He wants to know if they know how to get to the old Frankie Avalon estate. He would have been coming down the street right here, and this is right around the corner from the chick's house, and it's not very recognizable because all the trees and bushes right here have grown a lot. Joe and Hubs give them directions, and they head off on their way. After everything that happened that night, Joe's tired of getting pushed around, so now he puts Hubs into a headlock. And that happens at the intersection of Ventura Boulevard and DeSoto. Notice this church steeple on the right side. You can also see this shopping center on the left, although it's been heavily remodeled since then. This is where they're driving in the very final shot of the movie. Probably the two most noticeable things are this very unique looking building and this sign. You can also see a lot of this building right here, but once again, covered by trees. During the end credits, we see Joe and Hubs driving around Culver City and the two police officers driving around Ventura Boulevard in the San Fernando Valley. Here we see Joe and Hubs driving through the intersection of Sepulveda Boulevard and Washington. Notice that Arco gas station on the right side. We then see the two police officers pass by a church steeple and a sign for Leslie's Pools with a McDonald's on the right and a Taco Bell on the left. There's the church steeple, the sign for Leslie's Pools. This Starbucks used to be Taco Bell, and right over here used to be McDonald's. Back to Culver City, we see Joe and Hubs passing by this Big 5 sporting good on Sepulveda Boulevard and Lindblade. The two police officers are now passing by In-N-Out Burger on Ventura Boulevard in Woodland Hills. We get a quick post-credit scene where we see Joe and Hubs walk out of Liquor World, and a couple of members of Blue Oyster Cult are standing out there selling bootleg BOC t-shirts. Joe and Hubs would have walked out of Liquor World, and then right over here is where they're selling the t-shirts. Well, that's it. I wasn't able to find Muldoon's house, I wasn't able to find the gas station, and I wasn't able to find the beach that they're walking on. I just couldn't think of a beach that had trees. I've never seen a beach like that. This behind me is Torrance Beach, and as you can see, it looks nothing like the one we see in the movie. I don't believe that they actually filmed in Torrance or PV or in the South Bay at all. If you know where any of those locations are, let me know, leave me a comment, and I'll do a follow-up video. As always, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.